As a fan of shonen anime and manga, I often see quite a bit of bad discourse surrounding them. Some of it I can understand where it comes from, that mostly being bad anime adaptations of things like Naruto, Bleach, and One Piece. But some of it honestly just leaves me sitting there a bit baffled. One such thing being the idea of the Shounen Female Curse. Now you may be asking, the Shounen Female Curse, what even is that? And honestly, that's a pretty good question. This concept is basically that shonen anime and manga just don't have good female casts and characters. Now, exploring this concept is probably going to shatter every last brain cell I have and leave me a husk of a human being, so please be sure to leave a like on this video and subscribe for more so that my brain can slowly recover from the dopamine of seeing my number go up. I suppose to start this off, we have to figure out exactly where the idea of shonen not having good female characters comes from. Arguably, we could just point to a CBR article about how Ochaku Uraraka broke the shonen female lead curse, but any look at forums or places where anime discussions occur would show you that it runs a little deeper than a single article published at the tail end of 2019. Even just a simple Google search brings up a forum post from 2015 filled with misinformation and honestly shockingly racist assumptions about Japanese society that led to this phenomenon of bad shonen females. While I could spend even more of my time going as far back as physically possible, to try and pinpoint the exact moment in time where people decided that shonen women are bad, actually, I'd much rather look at the reasons why people believe this and try to understand where they are coming from, or rather dissect exactly why these arguments either make no sense or simply don't actually apply to the characters or series that people are trying to tie them to. After spending too much time scouring Twitter and asking around on Discord servers, I think I've pinpointed the main issues that fans generally take up with these characters. The first of which being the ever-present issue of fan service. I'll be the first to admit that fan service used to actively annoy me, but now I kinda just look at it as something that happens, and I generally feel pretty much nothing about it. From what I can tell, people tend to take an issue with it when a character's only character trait is fan service. However, in my experience, that practically almost never happens. The obvious example that people tend to bring up here is, well, basically any Hiro Mashima work, but for simplicity's sake, let's just say Fairy Tail. For full transparency, I've only read the first 100 chapters of Fairy Tail, but even with just that limited sample of the manga, I can tell you firsthand that Lucy, who is the main target of a lot of hate towards female characters, has so much more going on than people ever really give her credit for, let alone just being a fan service character. Lucy is a core component to how Fairy Tail portrays its themes of friendship and bonds. One of the more powerful moments in the first 100 chapters coming between Lucy and a fellow Fairy Tail member, Loki. Without explaining the entire arc or how everything about the magic in Fairy Tail works, a brief summary is Lucy uses a kind of magic that uses summons, and Loki is actually Leo, who would be one of those summons, but is hiding in the human world because he killed his previous owner. As Loki begins to fade away, Lucy attempts to use her own magic to save him and change the rules of the world. This leads to the King of the Spirit World coming out, and through Lucy's determination to save her friend, allows Loki to return to the Spirit World. As Loki fades away, his summoning key materializes, and he hands it to Lucy as a gesture of thanks. All of this happens in a 5-chapter arc within the first 100 chapters of Fairy Tail, and pretty plainly shows that there is more to Lucy as a character than just fan service. The second big complaint that I gathered was that the female characters are either flat, one note, or only in service to the main character. I can't help but feel like this comes from a pretty fundamental misunderstanding of what actually makes for a good character. A flat character is normally a minor character that simply shows no signs of character growth or change at all. Now, I can't tell for sure if people that use this as a criticism for female main characters are doing it in a serious way or just trying to be dismissive of them. But let's approach this from a more serious standpoint. The example that was brought to my attention for this one was Orohime Inoue from Bleach. Now, my friend What the What actually made a long-ass video fully explaining Orohime's character, which I will leave a link in the description to if you want to hear about all of that. But any brief summary, Orohime is a character that grows her bonds through shared pain with other people. Her growth as a character is largely based around learning to grow bonds with people without needing to share pain with them, and also strengthening herself to be able to fight alongside the one she loves, that being the main character, Ichigo. This is a goal that, if you've read the manga, you would see that she is able to achieve as she is able to stand by Ichigo's side going into the final battle. Orohime is a character that gets the criticisms of being flat and only in service to the main character thrown at her regularly, but really she's anything but a flat character arc, and her character arc is insanely well written, while still being focused around her relationship with Ichigo, which I think comes back to my point of people misunderstanding what makes a character good. A flat character is not a bad character, and neither is a one-note character. I would even argue that these characters are an important part of storytelling, and furthermore, a character arc being tied in with the main character also isn't a bad thing at all, and can often lead to some of the most satisfying arcs that I've ever experienced in anime and manga. The last major criticism that I see often regarding female characters is the feeling that some of them are useless. This one pretty much only comes into play from Battle Shonen, and honestly feels like the least valid of any of these. So basically this one is based around the idea that in Battle Shonen, typically female characters are just weaker than their male counterparts, or eventually the main characters just get so strong that the strength of female characters just doesn't matter. This complaint does have a bit of truth to it, because in a lot of instances female characters don't do an awful lot of fighting in their respective series, with some obvious exceptions, of course. However, while the complaint does have some truth to it, I would also like to point out that characters in a battle shonen don't have to be defined by their fights. I think the easiest example to use for this point would be Winry Rockbell from Fullmetal Alchemist, a character whose role in the series is simply not to be a fighter. Possibly the most iconic moment for her as a character comes when she comes face to face with the man who killed her parents, and she has a gun in hand. The man in question is also currently trying to kill her childhood friend and the main character of the story, Ed. The villain in this moment is Scar, and he actually tells her to pull the trigger, and how she has every right to shoot him for what he's done. However, Winry can't pull the trigger, and it almost leads to Ed and Al getting hurt, but they manage to drive him off, and what happens after has stuck with me ever since I saw it years ago. Ed confronts Winry to put down the gun she's holding, and she has an emotional breakdown about how she was confronted with her parents' killer and just couldn't pull the trigger, and she can't figure out why. Ed, while uncurling her fingers from around the gun, says this: "Winry, let me tell you something. When you helped deliver that baby in Rush Valley, you saved that mother and child. You also gave me an arm and a leg so that I could get back on my feet. Your hands weren't meant to take people's lives. They were meant to save them." With this statement from Ed, the story pretty much throws Winry's purpose in the story in the reader's face, showing that she's simply not meant to be a fighter. This far from makes Winry a useless character, though, considering she basically functions as the emotional core for the entire series. And I really, really hope I don't have to explain why that's an important role to have. Shonen manga is an incredibly vast and diverse demographic worth of stories, with all kinds of casts and characters From female-led series like Bloom Into You and Medaka Box to more traditional battle manga like Naruto or Bleach. There are so many different kinds of stories out there with plenty of female characters to discuss and read about. I think regardless of your viewpoint on the things I've said in this video, we can all agree on saying that making sweeping generalizations about all of these drastically different stories, like they just don't have female characters, is more than a little bit of a stretch. My advice is to keep reading these manga or watching these anime to hear or see what they're really trying to say or do with these characters, and I think that if you do that, you'll end up with a much greater appreciation and understanding of these stories and characters themselves. Going forward, I want to make more detailed breakdowns on specific female characters because I absolutely love talking about them, so subscribe for that if that sounds interesting to you. Thanks so much for watching if you made it this far, it means a lot, and I'll hopefully see you in the next video.